Hi everyone, and welcome to English Digest. I'm Pat.
And I'm Erin.
So today we're going to discuss some news from the world of Formula One, or F1. Now, I've watched a few races in my life, or parts of races, and I can kind of follow it online. It's fairly well kind of represented on the BBC Sport website. Do you know much about F1?
Absolutely nothing.
Okay, well, to be fair, the person who sits next to me upstairs, Alex, one of our other English editors, he is a big F1 fan.
Okay.
So it was handy having him next to me as he could sort of supply me with various bits of data and information and
Excellent.
other things like that. So I asked him a few things about this article, and kind of thanks to him, I've got a vague idea of what's going on in the current F1 season.
Okay, well, I know that they drive really fast around a circuit.
That's basically it, yes.
And there may be a name of a famous F1 driver on the tip of my tongue that I can't remember.
Lewis Hamilton, the British guy?
No.
Michael Schumacher.
That's the one.
The German. He was excellent. He was in a coma for something. I'm not actually sure if he fully came out of it that well. But yeah, he was good certainly good in the 90s. Lewis Hamilton is the current British sort of number one who's winning a few races. But we're not talking about who's doing well or not. We're talking about a different piece of news that's to do with something that has happened in F1 this season in terms of how they are presenting the race as a sport and one of the things around that. So let's read through the article and find out what that is. Formula One, F1, involves talented drivers racing the fastest cars in the world. Until the 2018 season, it also involved grid girls, attractive young women who appeared at the races generally wearing revealing outfits. However, the F1 governing body recently decided to put an end to this practice, and from the start of the season in March, the grid girls were replaced by grid kids. Grid girls carried out a number of roles at F1 races. Their clothes featured the names of sponsors, which brought in money for the sport. They also held drivers' name boards at the start of races and presented winners with their prizes at the finish line. Last but not least, they interacted with the crowd, for example by chatting and posing for photos. Though grid girls were one of F1's traditions, the sports directors no longer believe they match the brand values that F1 wants to present. A number of other sports have recently abolished customs that objectify women, such as boxing's ring girls and televised darts walk-on girls. Instead of the women, F1 will now feature grid kids. These are youngsters from the junior or go-kart circuits who'll get the chance to meet their idols, which will hopefully inspire them to keep practicing and become F1 stars themselves. Many people have praised F1 for its progressive move, saying that the tradition is sexist and unnecessary. Not everyone approves of the decision, however. A number of top F1 drivers, including Sebastian Vettel, have said they'll miss the grid girls. Meanwhile, some former grid girls have been critical, saying the job was both interesting and lucrative, and that they'd never felt demeaned or vulnerable. The Monaco and Russian Grand Prix race organisers have said they'll employ grid girls this season, but otherwise, they're set to become a thing of the past.
Okay, so not really about the racers or the drivers here, more so about what happens outside of the race with these grid girls. So if we just look at the title, we'll find out exactly what's happening. It says Formula One replaces grid girls with grid kids. Now, for the uninformed, Formula One is a race, and a race that happens in many different places.
All around the world.
All around the world. And basically, you get the fastest cars in the world, and you race them around. And the drivers who control them, obviously, are very good at what they do. They have to be to stay alive. And,
I mean, it is a sport because they have to be physically fit.
Yes.
They have to be really reactive. There's also a lot of strategy in terms of when the teams change tires, refuel. So
how to go around corners, all those things.
Yeah, which is often when they try to overtake people because you can't overtake someone on just a flat stretch of road. You need to try and take them at a corner.
Right.
There are other formulas for slightly slower cars and slightly less talented races, but Formula One or F1 is the top. It's like the fastest, the best.
Right. Now, here's what they've done. They've replaced grid girls with grid kids. Now, grid girls, as we'll see later on, are attractive young women who have jobs in the F1 races or at the F1 races. What's happening here is that they're being replaced. Now, when you replace someone or something, you remove someone from their job or something from its place and put a new person or thing there where the old one was before. So we won't see grid girls there anymore. We will see grid kids instead.
Yeah, and we'll kind of explain what both of those are.
Right.
So we start off with that introduction that we've kind of covered. Formula One or F1 involves talented drivers racing the fastest cars in the world. So these are sports cars.
Right.
Super sports cars. These aren't the kinds of things you could drive on a road.
No, not at all.
Yeah, it would just be too dangerous. They hit speeds well over 100 miles an hour.
Right. Okay, so these cars at the races, what's happening here in the second sentence is that it involves grid girls. Now, these are attractive young women who appear at the races, generally wearing revealing outfits. So, of course, by attractive, when we say that someone is attractive, we're saying that they're good looking, especially in a way that kind of makes you think about them in a sexual manner. And that's what's happening here, and we know that because it says that they're generally wearing revealing outfits. Now, a piece of clothing that is revealing allows part of your body to be seen that wouldn't normally be seen because it's covered up in some way.
Yeah, we're talking short skirts.
Right,
we're
short
talking,
shorts, low
tops
tops.
that reveal bits of stomach or other places and things like that.
Right.
And a set of clothes is an outfit.
Right.
One piece of clothing isn't an outfit, but the whole thing you're wearing, that could include everything from your hat all the way down to your shoes.
Right.
So they would kind of dress up in different things in different races. Sometimes it would be about the country where the race is in. Some other thing would be a theme to do with the time of year that the race was taking place. They'd all have kind of costumes. And generally these costumes were kind of revealed a bit. They were often quite tight.
Right.
And the women who did this were generally models. You know, they would,
so
they would work 1 or 2 days a week at this and then they'd maybe work in other modeling jobs elsewhere and so on.
Right. So they've got their hair done. They've got lots of makeup on. Like, they look great. Okay, so what is happening here? It says the F1 governing body. So that's basically the officials who are in charge of F1, the president, the vice presidents, that sort of thing, recently decided to put an end to this practice. So we're not going to have grid girls anymore. And here it says from the start of the season in March, the grid girls were replaced by kids. So we're in July now. So for the past 3 months, they haven't had grid girls in some places. Yeah.
Now, I will give a bit of extra information here for context. In the last couple of years, the board of directors, the people running F1, have changed. And one of the older, more traditional guys who'd been running it for a long time kind of was moved aside due to age, and there are now younger people who know that F1 needs to make certain changes to make it more broadly appealing to more people.
Right.
And so this is one of several changes of this kind of thing that have been made to sort of broaden F1's appeal. So it's not just an isolated thing with this sport.
All right, so let's find out what these grid girls do at the races. It says they carry out a number of roles. So by carry out, we mean that you're doing something that has been organized or planned. You're making that kind of workout. You're making that happen. Now, you could carry out something that you said you will do or that someone has asked you to do. So if someone at work asks you to do an assignment, you carry that assignment out and you do it and you finish it.
Yeah, we also talk about carrying out a survey, carrying out some kind of examination or inspection. But yeah, it works well with responsibilities and in this case, job duties.
Right.
So let's take a look at what the grid girls actually did. So we've mentioned their clothes, as well as being revealing often, their clothes featured the names of sponsors. To feature something means to kind of have or show that thing as one of the main or most important things about it, something that's easy to notice, something that's fairly obvious when you look at it. It's a feature of it. And in this case, they're featuring the names of sponsors. So that means the names of the sponsors are displayed in the clothing where they're nice and big, easy to read, and it's obvious to see.
Right.
The sponsors are people who are giving money to F1 in order to have their company names displayed.
Right.
So they see it as advertising for their products, their companies, and so they pay for that advertising.
Right.
And of course, that brings in or makes or earns money for the sport.
Right.
You'll see this in a lot of sports. People have sponsors on their shirts. People have sponsors on their caps, sponsors on their equipment. Almost everything in every sport, they make money by putting a company's name on it.
Right. You'll see that with any kind of event as well.
Yes.
So if you go to a festival or you run in a marathon or you go to a concert, you'll see the names of companies that have paid money to help the event happen, and they're also getting advertising out of that.
Yeah, so it's basically a deal that works for both sides.
Right.
That one side gets more advertising and exposure, and then hopefully more people buy its products.
Okay, so they're obviously, these grid girls are wearing the names of the sponsors on their clothes. And they are also holding the drivers' name boards at the start of races and presenting winners with their prizes at the finish line. So basically I've never seen this happen, but I assume they kind of are at the beginning of the race standing next to the cars and showing the driver's name. Okay.
Yeah, because otherwise you would not exactly be able to tell which person was which under the helmets and in the gear and with all the cars and stuff.
Right.
So it just helps you if you're further back to go, okay, that's where these people are.
Right. Okay, and they're also obviously presenting the winners with prizes. So they would have the flowers, the trophies, that sort of thing.
The champagne that always gets shot and spilled around at the end.
Yeah. And last but not least, so of course this phrase just means that we are introducing one last point, but it's not the least important one. They interact with the crowd, for example, by chatting and posing for photos. So they get the crowd excited. You know, a lot of times it's just a lot of cars driving around in a circle sometimes. So, you know, they might talk to the people in the crowd and, you know, take pictures with them.
Exactly,
and just sort of like cheering up the day, I guess.
Yeah, and of course the people who are at the races, they can't really talk to the drivers, they can't talk to the mechanics, everyone's too busy and focused. So this means they get at least a chance to talk. And similarly, the drivers can talk to the grid girls. It's like somebody they can interact with that's not a fan. You know, there's a sort of relationship there where it's like, you know, we're both working and we're both sort of here for business, so we have a certain thing in common.
Right.
Okay, so that is who grid girls were. That is what they did. We'll come back in a few moments and we'll look about why this change was made and what the general reaction has been to this. We'll also talk about grid kids, so stay close. We'll be back in just a few moments. Okay, welcome back. So we've talked about who grid girls were and we've introduced the idea that they're being replaced. Let's talk about that decision. The third paragraph starts by saying, though grid girls were one of F1's traditions, the sports directors no longer believe they match the brand values that F1 wants to present. Now, I kind of mentioned earlier that there'd been a change in recent years in who was running this sport, and the newer people who are in charge, they want to make F1 more appealing to everyone. That's men, women, children, people who maybe weren't so interested in the sport, because the more people who view it, the more money you get, and so on. So they think that maybe a few people look at this and go, well, is this a bit sexist, having all these girls around, these beautiful girls who aren't really there? They don't want that to be something people associate with their brand. It creates negative feelings, criticism, and so on. I mean, it also creates some positive things for others. That's what we mean. It goes both ways. But they've decided this doesn't match our brand values. Someone's brand values are the things a company stands for, the things they want people to think about when they are associating with that sport. So they go, what is F1 about? Is F1 just about fast cars, pretty girls? No, F1 is about, competition and racing and everyone having a fair chance and so on.
And amazing engineering.
Yes. Yeah. So they just want to sort of show F1 in a different way and move away from this older tradition of just, I think one thing is they don't just want the only women to be involved with the sport to be the models. They want women to be driving. They want women to be engineers. They want women to be involved with the teams and their planning. They want them to be equals, basically.
Okay, well, what it says here next is something we talked about briefly in the introduction. Formula One or F1 is not the only kind of sport that has done this. Here it says, a number of other sports have recently abolished customs that objectify women, such as boxing's ring girls and televised darts walk-on girls. So here's what they did. They abolished the customs that objectified women. Now, when you abolish something, you officially end something, such as a law or a system that's been in place for a long time. And that's basically what you're doing. It's usually something that's been in place for more than several years, quite a long time, and you're officially getting rid of it. So it's not just like, oh, I'm going to throw out my old bike. I've had it for so long, it's no good. You're not abolishing your bike.
You don't abolish your bike.
Right. You're abolishing like a law or a system or a rule that's been in place for a while. Now, what they're abolishing or getting rid of here is customs that objectify women. Now, when you objectify someone, you treat that person as if they're a physical object and nothing more. Okay, so you're making them an object. Now, recently, a lot of women have been saying, I'm not just an object, I'm more than just an object. Think about me for more than my body, my mind is great too, that sort of thing. So what people, or why they're getting rid of this is because what Pat said, they don't want F1 to be just about the pretty women and their bodies. They want F1 to be about engineering and racing and sport and competition and
other things like that.
Yeah, and equality for all genders.
Exactly. Yeah. And so we look at a couple of other sports that have made similar decisions. Boxing abolished ring girls. These were women, again, attractive models in revealing outfits who would stand up and walk around the ring holding signs that said round 2.
Right.
And that's pretty much all they were there for in sort of men's boxing. Of course, women box as well, and there are a lot of good women boxers. So they don't want to highlight that at a boxing match, women are only there to look good. They want to highlight other things. Same in darts. Now here, televised darts means it's on TV. If something is televised, it just means you can see it on television. Darts is a game you'll often see it in bars and sort of arcades. It's throwing small, sharp things at a board to score points.
Right.
And in darts, they had walk-on girls who, again, would stand up between the games, attractive women, revealing outfits, holding signs saying, end of this game, or just kind of walking on, like, with the darts players.
Right.
So, again,
I think that's where walk-on comes from.
It's the image of the men play darts, the women look good. Right. And that's what they're trying to get rid of.
Right. Okay, so here's what's happening. So instead of the women, or the grid girls, or the ring girls, or the walk-on girls, F1 will now feature grid kids. So they're just bringing kids in, and this is where they're getting them. It says here, these are youngsters from the junior or go-kart circuits who will get the chance to meet their idols. So basically what's happening here is when a kid is really interested in F1 and they say, oh, I might want to be a race car driver, they can go join like junior competitions or go-kart competitions. Now, Taiwan has go-karts, and it's just like a little mini car that you can drive around a circuit, which is the path that the race follows, basically. And instead of just kind of sitting on the sidelines and watching now, they get to go and do this job and meet the people they someday want to be. These are their idols. And an idol is someone or something that you love or admire very much, maybe because they do something that you want to do, or they've done something you've really respected, that sort of thing.
Exactly. Just to go back, the word circuit is another name for the track that's used during motor racing. We could also use it for horse racing or even athletics. But often in F1, a circuit will mean a particular race. So we would say the Monaco circuit, which is actually in the city of Monaco itself.
Okay.
The Shanghai circuit, which Kuala Lumpur in Malaysia has its own circuit, and so on. It just means the track. So the idea of letting the kids meet these idols, these people they look up to, will hopefully inspire them to keep practicing and become F1 stars. It's, some of these kids are chosen, I read, at random. So it's just, hey, you've done it and your name's come up. You get to be at the race today.
Right.
Sometimes it's given out as a reward for good performances. So, hey, if you win this race or finish in the top 5, you'll get to go on and meet, Lewis Hamilton and the guy we'll mention in the next paragraph and so on. And you'll get to meet the stars. I mean, what a great experience. When I was a kid, I would have loved to meet all these football and various other stars that I liked.
Yeah, I think that's a great move. Now, other people have really liked this decision. It says here, many people have praised F1 for its progressive move, saying that the tradition is sexist and unnecessary. Progressive, this adjective, describes things that support new or modern ideas or new ways of doing something. And so I guess like in the past 100 years or so, women have been fighting to get better treatment, to get equal treatment, to
voting rights,
even just like better pay at work and
equal pay,
equal pay.
More control over their own bodies and all sorts of things.
And so based on human history, this is a relatively modern idea because it's only been happening for the past 100 years or so. And in human history, that's not very long. So you can see this as a progressive idea. It's a new modern idea. It's hoping to do things better for women and other humans in the world.
Yeah, we could also talk about the approval of same-sex marriage as a progressive move.
Right.
It's moving into the sort of, of course 2 men can marry, or of course 2 women can marry.
Right.
Whereas that would have been outlawed in the past. So anything that sort of changes old ways and reforms it is progressive. Because the old tradition of grid girls, they would say it's sexist. It's discriminating on the basis of gender.
Right.
Saying that, men are the ones who should be driving and women just stand there and look pretty. That is a sexist attitude. That is not correct. It's saying that one gender is better than another.
In many ways, it could be in a physical, weaker way, or one is stronger than the other. And generally, men are stronger than women physically. But, it's like kind of purporting men to be the best because they're stronger is kind of what we're saying is a more sexist idea. It could be with intelligence. It could be with importance in jobs, anything like that. Okay, so some people like this decision and some people don't. And it is something to be discussed, but let's talk about the criticisms here. It says, not everyone approves of the decision, however. Now, when you approve of something, you think that someone or something is good or right or suitable for a situation. You say, no, that's not okay. I don't approve. Or, yes, that looks great. I approve.
Okay, so one group of people or one type of people who've not really approved of the decision is the top F1 drivers. We mentioned one here, Sebastian Vettel, who I forget whether he's German or Austrian, but he's basically one of the top 2 in the world right now. And he says he'll miss the grid girls. Now, you could kind of take that to mean that, of course, he doesn't mind being around attractive women.
Right.
He's not actually standing out and saying, like, this is wrong, we should have them. He's more saying it in and a few of the others have said the same thing. They kind of like the idea.
It's like they're co-workers as well, right?
Yeah, a lot of them have taken pains to say, it's not just because they're attractive women in short skirts. It's because it's, we're working together, we're doing stuff together. There's somebody we can become friends with away from the pressures, because it's hugely stressful, these races.
Exactly.
So maybe it was something that helped them.
Yeah.
The next opinion, however, is more interesting because it's some of the people who have been grid girls.
Right. So some of these former grid girls have been critical of the decision. And By critical, we mean that they are making criticisms of this. They're criticizing the decision for some reason or another. And what they're saying here is that the job was interesting, for one, and it was lucrative, which means it made them quite a lot of money.
Yes.
And so they're also saying that they'd never felt demeaned or vulnerable. So by demeaned, when you demean someone, you kind of treat them with disrespect because of something they've done. And so what we're saying here is that they've never felt like they haven't been respected because they are wearing revealing clothes or doing this job, sort of thing. And vulnerable, someone who's vulnerable is able to be easily harmed or hurt or damaged in some way.
Yeah, exactly. So now this is not all the girls have spoken up, so we've only taken some opinions, but they were there in the news when this story was breaking, that they said, like, what's wrong with us doing this job? A lot of them, as I mentioned, are professional models.
Right.
They are, they have been considered to be beautiful, they have attractive, healthy bodies, and they would like to make their living by modeling. And that happens in numerous different ways and professions. So they're saying, well, you've just cut off one of my job opportunities. Which was interesting, it was fun, and I didn't feel like anyone was disrespecting me or harming me.
Right.
So that's an interesting opinion that the grid girls themselves thought, hey, there's nothing wrong with this, because of course if they did, they would not do the work, they would protest against it, and so on.
I feel like it goes to an even deeper issue where many of the jobs available to women in the past have been ones that put them on a pedestal because of their looks. Now, I tend to agree with them. They are cutting off a source of income, and so that makes sense to me. But what remains to be seen is if that source of income will be replaced with something else, sort of thing.
Yes, so, if they're women are more likely to get jobs on the engineering teams.
Or in the administration, or, make those jobs available.
Of the overall teams, sure.
Yeah.
So, there are two sides to this, and it'll probably take a little while. And not everything is completely changing. We see here in the last sentence that the Monaco and Russian Grand Prix race organisers have said they'll employ grid girls this season. The Grand Prix is just a French word meaning grand prize, and it's the name given to the F1 Formula One races. So the Monaco race in the city of Monaco is the Monaco Grand Prix. The one in Russia is the Russian Grand Prix.
Right.
It's just the name given to it. And their organisers have said, no, I know the F1 directors have said we're stopping it, but we still want to employ them. To employ somebody is to pay somebody to do a job, either full-time and permanently, like our jobs here, or short-time, just like I'm going to pay you to do this one thing over this weekend. Right.
Okay, and so this season, those two races those two circuits will have the grid girls?
Yeah, I think in the case of Monaco already has. I forget when it was. I don't really follow this sport, but I think they've already had the Monaco one, maybe.
Okay.
But anyway, they were there. But otherwise, and maybe in future seasons, grid girls, which is what we mean by they are set to become a thing of the past. If something is a thing of the past, it's from history. It's not relevant. It's not happening in modern day.
Right.
All right. Well, that brings us to the end of our article. Hope this inspires you to learn more about F1 and, find out more about what's going on and maybe even get into it and see a race. There are Shanghai, there are Malaysia. There are ones that aren't so far away if you want to go and try and see one.
All right. Well, that is all that we can talk about for today. So for English Digest, I am Erin.
And I'm Pat.
And we'll talk to you next time. Bye-bye.
Bye.